This is a Global Skills Podcast, conversations that shape the future of work and learning. We're exploring how we close the skills gap and build a future where everyone has the chance to thrive. From education to business, connecting people, ideas, and opportunities that drive change. It's about collaboration, curiosity, and creating real impact today. Because every skill learned brings us one step closer to a more inclusive world. The Global Skills Podcast, where learning and opportunity come together. Oonagh Kelly is a powerhouse people and culture leader who brings clarity, courage, and humanity into some of the most complex organizational environments. As Chief People Officer at the National Treasury Management Agency, she operates at the intersection of strategy, culture, reward, shaping workplaces where people don't just perform, they feel valued and recognized. Her career spans large-scale transformation, talent strategy, leadership development, inclusion, and reward frameworks that genuinely support performance, well-being, and long-term sustainability. Oonagh leads transformation by bringing people with her, whether guiding senior leaders, embedding inclusive reward strategies, or building cultures where contribution is seen and celebrated. She constantly raises the bar. The result is organizations that attract great talent, retain them, and inspire people to give their best because they know it truly matters. So we are really, really happy to have Oonagh on today's show. Thank you, Oonagh.
Thanks, Vanessa. Delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Your journey to the role that you're in is an unusual one and a long one. And I would love to know, for those that are listening about maybe starting off their career path, where did you start and how did you navigate to the position that you're in today?
Great question. So it started really early on. I think the thing that stood out for me in the choices that I made at a very early stage and still stick with me now are doing things that I am passionate about and kind of combining a love for and interest for a particular subject or area with probably capability. So doing things that you love and that you're good at and kind of applying those. And I think you can't go far wrong actually if you kind of keep that in mind. So like lots of people actually from at my of my kind of age and stage, I left school quite young. I did my leaving cert at 16. That wasn't that unusual because transition year wasn't really that big of a thing at the time. So it meant that you were making career choices, sort of third level or post-school choices, but that you weren't really equipped to make when you were kind of 16. I remember filling in, my CAO application in early 1991 and thinking, like this just seems really odd. But what I did know was that there were certain things that I was very passionate about that I loved. And I felt, well, look, that will not serve me badly if I sort of act in line with those interests. So I loved French, I loved history, I loved languages generally, and there was a very new course at the time offered in the university I wanted to go to, which was European Studies, which was very much in line with, growing all of this generation of new Europeans to go work at maybe state level or international level right across Europe. And it was very much the kind of growth of the European movement, etc. And that seemed to be a great combination of things that I loved, that I really enjoyed. So off I went. And 5 years later, having done a master's, took a little pause, looked around, thought, I'm not sure I'm fully ready to make the big leap into the European sort of structure. So I might just, see what Ireland has to offer. It wasn't a great time to be leaving college in Ireland. There weren't an awful lot of career choices and a lot of my classmates went abroad, but I was kind of interested in seeing what opportunities there were in Ireland. A great role came along with a recruitment company who were doing a lot of the staffing projects for organisations setting up in Ireland. And I initially sent them my CV for a job with, I think it was supposed to be Hewlett Packard at the time. But in fact, that company then said, well, what we need is someone who speaks a couple of European languages and who is actually a good kind of coordinator. So someone who can help us with assessment centres, interview days, someone who can help us with all of the logistics in the organisation and who can talk to lots of different people from different places. So I took that job and then enjoyed it so much that I stayed in HR related roles and then moved to an in-house HR role for an American financial services company in the early 2000s. Sort of went from there really. So I suppose what I'd say is, it went from being, how can I apply my interests and things that I really enjoy, that I'm quite good at, and see if that will help me navigate a career? And so far, so good.
You actually touch on a point that we haven't covered yet, that the number of Irish people represented in the European Commission and Parliament has actually dropped off. And going back to that early stages, and I know you didn't end up there, is there any advice that you give to a young person now? Because I know we have listeners that are both business leaders, educators, but equally new graduates and school leavers that are thinking, well, what should I choose next? What do you think is the value of choosing a degree that's that broad with the European lens on it?
Actually, interestingly, I saw that there are competitions being launched at all levels currently for European roles. So I just saw that last week, actually, for graduate level roles, entry level, admin grade roles, actually a lot of European institution recruiting happening at the moment, which I haven't seen in a while, which kind of speaks a little bit to the point you're making, which is that maybe momentum was lost for a little while and people didn't necessarily think of that as a real career. I have been a firm believer all of my career actually in broad-based education and broad degrees with then specialisms that you can build on. So almost like a sort of a horizontal and then with verticals based on whatever pillars you're interested in. And the reason that I've always thought that that's important is because it allows you to pivot from different components of work specialism, different interests that you might have at different times. So when I, again, did my degree, so European Studies is kind of a funny name for a really broad degree. And I studied politics, I studied history, language, culture, European institutions, etc. So I'm not sure what the right title might be for that type of degree, but what it has allowed me to do is to then, through my career, for example, build a HR specialism where I didn't have to do some of the components because of the bachelor's degree and the master's that I already had, and to add on other areas of interest throughout that time. So that foundation that probably taught me, critical thinking skills, problem solving, spotting patterns, identifying possible future patterns, etc., how to research, how to condense lots and lots of information into something that has a core sort of meaning. Those skills allow you, I think, to then systematically add on other things. So then back to the other question around what advice would I have? I would say really be ready to pivot throughout your career. I think unless you're a real specialist, for example, a doctor, maybe an architect, unless there is something with very specific training, there aren't that many careers where you can't navigate through different aspects of it, actually. So again, I think it's really important to have that horizontal layer where you have those core cognitive and critical skills that allow you to think and to learn that you can then add on to throughout your life.
And what do you think about the role of higher education at the moment? And I won't just limit it to higher education. I'd like to expand it to apprenticeships because I know that they're gaining momentum again. You covered there a lot of hard and even human skills that you realized were in your degree. And I know a lot of the work that I do with my other hat in the Bodu is really trying to, I guess, show educators the value of students understanding the skills that they have, not just the name of the degree or the name of the apprenticeship. How important do you think that is today?
So I think it's really critical. And I think one of the hardest things for organizations actually to pull out of people or to highlight for people are mental agility and learning agility. And those two things, if I could tell anyone to, understand where you are in those skills, I would say go and identify those. So I remember working on a really big talent program earlier in my career. It's a good few years ago now. And one of the things that we were looking at was talent program to identify future leaders for a business segment that was having to go through a lot of change, and we didn't actually entirely know where it was going to end. And so we then put hundreds of leaders in this organization through an assessment program. And one of the top things we were looking for was learning agility. And that is really the ability to figure out what to do when you don't know what to do, which is increasingly the world we're in now, right? So I think for lots of people actually having an understanding of, well, where am I in that? Can I figure out what to do when I don't know what to do? Am I able to go and research? Can I talk to people? Can I track down information? Can I seek a solution? Are there patterns? Are there things that I could predict possible options? And am I able to then be mentally agile enough to quickly pivot? Something's not working. Okay, that's fine. All is not lost. Can we adjust and go on a different path? What are the other options available to us? I think for higher educators and all educators, being able to bring it back to, how well can this person navigate in this way, as opposed to, are they able to do this very technical thing, which they probably can do, but having an understanding of that learning agility and mental agility, I think would be really, really additive in that space.
It reminds me of, I used to work with Fujitsu and the leadership team there on early talent, and they ended up modeling their leaders with a predictive index, a personality assessment, to try and go to graduates. And they weren't all graduates. Maybe they had lacked experience, to see, did anyone have that natural trait that they could develop, because they knew they could teach the hard skills. But what about the people that don't have that? Like, what role does education play in that? Because is it something that can be developed, or do you think you're born with it?
No, I absolutely think you can develop that. Again, I think, sort of back to the point that I was making earlier, that it's very important, I think, for people to do degrees or any type of further study. And it doesn't matter what it is, actually. Firstly, I'm a believer you can learn throughout your life. And I am a big advocate of lifelong learning. I'm a very curious learner, and I'm always looking at, always reading articles, I'm always researching different things. It's not always, a course, like a diploma program or whatever. There are lots of different ways that you can learn. And I think that that's very important. And people are actually well able to learn throughout their lives, but they don't necessarily always think that way. And then back to the education system, I think, again, having multiple routes for entry, having multiple routes for training, multiple routes for learning is really important. I do think as well that from a sort of an overall kind of system perspective, there can be a bit of a reach, let's really focus on STEM, and then it's, and then there'll be a focus on something else, and then there'll be a focus on something else. And I get that. I get if you have a skills shortage in a particular area, you're going to design solutions to address it. But I would also say it's not all or nothing. You can be looking at different skills, different criteria, different components in different ways, all of the time. That will suit different people. And not everybody wants a career in STEM. Not everybody wants to be, for example, a scientist or an engineer, where that's specific. But actually, there are foundational skills that would allow you to pivot in lots of different ways and have an adjacent career. So I think that that's very important.
Yeah, and you raise a good point. I mean, there's a lot of funding coming from Europe and in the UK all around skills. But if you read the news, they're on the latest skills that are needed in Gen AI, sustainability, and so on. So what you're saying is, can we create more of a all-inclusive system? It doesn't matter if you're coming through and you got 300 points in the Leaving Cert, 600 points. If you've strong human skills or they're still in development, that there is a doorway or a gateway for every single person and a pathway that they can go on.
Completely agree. And it's really, really important. Again, it's like the best workplaces are the inclusive workplaces, where you consider all the components of a person, an individual person, and lots of people. I think the point system, look, that's only one measure. There's been lots written about it over time. I'm not sure what, a perfect system would be, or if there is one there. My heart does sink a little bit when there is a very big emphasis on a number as a specific sort of measure of attainment, where I'd actually rather take that whole person view and say, well, what are all of the things that people are good at? And what are all of the capabilities that people bring into a workplace that will allow us to solve real problems in new and fresh ways, and, new problems that we haven't come across yet, and find new solutions to things.
So the role that you have, maybe I could start with asking you to explain, what is the National Treasury Management Agency?
So great question. So the National Treasury Management Agency is sort of like a portfolio of different mandates. It was initially set up by government just over 35 years ago to manage the national debt. And we have since expanded to manage several sovereign wealth funds. So we invest on behalf of Ireland. We invest in Ireland. So we manage money, taxpayers' money, for the future. We manage liabilities against the state. We manage infrastructure projects. We provide advisory services. So there is a sort of a different range of activities that the NTMA does on behalf of the Irish taxpayer.
And from a talent perspective, I would imagine you have an extremely diverse range of skills within the agency. Can you talk a little bit about the different departments and the type of skill sets and the levels that you look at within the agency, and any sort of learning modules or development programs that you've put in to, I guess, touch on that point where it's helped people have a pathway within the agency and not just a job?
Great. Yeah, I have to. So I'll talk about roles, and I'll talk about skills. So in terms of roles, we have lots of accountants, lots of solicitors, lots of engineers, corporate finance professionals. We have HR professionals. We have people in our dealing room. We have treasury managers and so on. So real breadth of roles. From a skills perspective, I would say the number one thing that everyone has in common is actually on that problem solving, mental agility, learning agility, ability to adapt. And having an adaptable workforce is very important for us. We're set up so differently to the way that other companies might be set up from a commercial perspective. We're set up by mandate. So, for example, the Department of Finance, which is our main parent department, might say, we will mandate you to do X activity. Piece of legislation is passed. We set up this unit and off we go. And having the adaptable workforce to be able to say, okay, well, that's not exactly the same as that, but how will we take these skills around financial analysis, financial acumen, legal analysis, governance, people management, talent management, etc. So how will we take things that we already know how to do that we're good at and adapt those to set up something else in this new context? And the NTMA is really good at that. I would say that adaptability, that learning agility, that mental agility from a skill set perspective are really important and will have enabled us to be very successful.
Quick question. Do you actually know what skills exist across your organizations today? Or are decisions still being made on job titles, CVs, and assumptions around who can be reskilled and upskilled? You see, as AI reshapes work and organizations really face that pressure to cut costs, the real challenge isn't just skills gaps. It's understanding which skills are transferable and which can be redeployed into the future with a bit of upskilling. So for the listeners of Global Skills Podcast, Abodu, our sponsor, has created this free Skills AI readiness assessment. It gives leaders clarity in just 3 minutes. It shows skills gaps, automation exposure, and where future-ready capabilities already exist within your business. No data upload, no preparation, just clarity for the future of your organization. Visit abodu.com/global skills podcast. Now, back to the episode.
Is there anything that you've learned through doing this? Because I feel the experience that you've had is what a lot of companies are now facing for the first time. You know, divisions are shutting down, or that hybrid model between human and agent is going into departments, and people are either having to upskill, reskill, transfer their skills. How have you mapped and managed that so effectively?
Well, it's a journey, right? I think it's something that you need to always be thinking about. And I think firstly, understanding what are the core skills or core strengths of your organization today is very important. So what data do you have? What systems do you have to track and manage that data? I think lots of organizations went through a period of time where they invested in individuals because there was a big focus. And I remember this was really trendy in HR earlier in my career, having a high potential program, you know, and everybody wanted to have one. They weren't sure why they were doing it, but it was kind of popular. So it was like, if we have someone who we think could go really far in our organization, we should try and hold on to them for as long as possible, because chances are someone else will also want to hold them or to hire them. So we should invest in our high potentials. We should identify our high potentials. And so lots of companies did that. There was loads of investment in it. And then organizations discovered, actually, I'm not really sure what we're getting out of all of this high potential identification, other than we've kind of probably now told someone we see you as really high potential. So we're either A, going to lose them because they're going to take that endorsement of themselves and head off somewhere else and leverage it for their own development, or they're going to get really frustrated if we don't promote them in whatever they think the perceived amount of time is. If we can't now live up to the standards they're expecting, that's going to be an issue for us. Lots of organizations did that, went down that path, and then actually realized that the secret weapon in all of it was high potential for what? What was the context? So why are we trying to do it? And I would say to any organization, so first you understand the context you're in. Where are you in your product life cycle, revenue life cycle, delivery life cycle? What do you anticipate coming? And what do you know about the skills and capabilities of all of the people that work there? Not just a cohort such as a high potential, but everybody. And again, if you bring it down to skills, do you know what they are? Do you know how much you have of them? And then what are the adjacent skills? So could you take people and cross-train them to do something else? Can you reskill people? What's your learning strategy around, let's just say, your actuaries? So I worked a lot with actuaries, or I have done throughout different points in my career. Actuarial skill set, highly analytical, very good at problem solving, really, really bright, kind of numerous people whose skill set can be applied in lots of different ways. So it doesn't just have to be in modeling and insurance. It could be in investing. It could be in quantitative analysis. It could be in data science. So it's, again, boiling it down to what are the core skills and what are the adjacent fields where they could be applied? And are we creating pathways then for people to be able to move into those different pathways? So it's not just, back to what I was saying earlier, it's not just a job, but it's also a skill set. And what are the fields where that skill set's a good fit?
Just as you're speaking there, I'm thinking like we work with companies to try and bring in the skills intelligence and connect learning to recruitment to human capital, if we want to call it that. But as you were speaking there, I was thinking we are expecting a lot from leaders to know the pathways, know how to define a skill, know how to connect a skill to a job, to a competency. Do you think enough training happens at leadership level to be able to do all of this work that needs to be done now more than ever?
So I think it's a great question. I think of all of the areas where I probably worry the most actually about the capability, it's of people leaders, because the role of a people leader has gotten broader, deeper, more complex. You have to cover so many more things as a people leader. It used to be people managers sort of hired good people, made sure they were trained, made sure they were paid well, and told them what to do. And that was it. Now they have to consider hybrid working, diversity and inclusion. They've got to consider different needs that people have. They've got to consider having to refresh their teams over and over again, because tenure isn't linear. You're not going to hire a team and keep every single person on that team for 10 years. You're going to have people coming and going at different times. There are so many things that come at people leaders. So I feel of all of the areas actually where I think I really want to do more to support my people leaders, I really want to help them in their roles to deliver. That's the area that I focus on the most. And the people leader capability, which again, the needs are just so different and they continue to evolve. That's one area that I think really needs a lot of strong support.
What is it about your role that you love? Because I would imagine that you are juggling a lot of balls. Not only are you juggling a lot of types of departments and supporting the people and all the people that report up to you, but what is it that you love in this current climate? Because I wouldn't say it's an easy role that you have. But clearly you seem to like it because you smile a lot. For anyone that can't see you right now, you do smile a lot when you're talking about your role.
So the thing that I love about my role, which I've always loved, is that HR doesn't just support the business, it shapes and it scales it. So for me, the exciting thing is looking at the organization, what kind of company we want to be, what future are we trying to build, and what talent systems will get us there. How do we support people leaders? How do we find the right skills? What leadership behaviors will unlock innovation? Where are we going in the future? How can we leverage what we were good at in the past? Those are the kinds of things that I find very exciting.
And what are your forecasts for the future? I mean, I have to touch on AI, obviously, and this idea of this human AI workplace. And in some scenarios, I know Deloitte are very much, look, let's just bring out a blank piece of paper and start from scratch. The whole working model is going to change, especially as we bring in robotics or humanoids, But if we talk about maybe now in the next year, what are you forecasting? And where are you looking to leverage more support for the departments that you oversee?
Again, it's back to what I mentioned earlier from a context perspective. I think it's really important for organizations to understand the context they are in. So it can be very easy to chase a big theme. So there's a lot talked about, AI hype curve, etc. So I think you have to be a little bit discerning and say, well, okay, what stage are we at as an organization and what business problems do we have where AI might be a solution and where would AI not be a solution? So based on what we currently know, I think the 12-month time horizon that you mentioned, Vanessa, is a really important one, actually. We have an AI strategy. We sort of put it out as something time-bound in the beginning and said this will be live for 12 months and let's see how we get on. I think that's very important. I think the cycle time for organizations getting shorter and shorter. I remember early in my career going to strategy workshops and people would talk about like a 7-year strategy. I remember the last time I saw something that long because the world is in a very rapid cycle of change now anyway. So I think 12-month time frame firstly is really good. I think considering the context. So in my department, we developed our own policy, AI driven policy tool last year, which we rolled out because one of the pain points that we had actually was people asking information about policies a lot. Couldn't find the information or they didn't look for the information or they just wanted something quick and easy. I'm a big believer in trying to create kind of friction-free experiences if you can, in areas where if it's really time consuming to track down the policy about maternity leave, that's really annoying for a colleague and way too time consuming for them and their poor old people leader who has a million things coming at them. So we developed an AI tool that can answer the query about the policy and then direct you to the policy so that you can read it yourself, and then will further redirect you to a member of my team if you have a more complex query that can't be answered at the end. But at least you'll come in with some knowledge and information. So that to me was very helpful, because we sat down and we workshopped this as a leadership team, and we looked at where are some pain points and what are possible solutions to those, and then let's test and learn as we go. So we've rolled out Copilot for colleagues, and it's positioned well again in our context because it's integrated directly into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. So all the tools that you use every day in Office, and that's been very useful for us to see as an initial foray for the whole organization. What are things that can make your day more efficient? Where lots of people said, well, there's no single one thing, but if I could track down information a little bit more quickly, or if I could summarize my email from someone, if it could help me to prepare for a meeting, if it could, find threads in my mailbox, that would be really great. So
it's a really good way of doing it, that workshopping of core problems and just kind of tackling those. There were mini pilots nearly, were they?
Yeah, exactly. And I like that way of doing things because, again, I suppose back to, our organization being a different portfolios, so different areas will have different needs at different times based on the way that they work and the information that they handle. And so having, sort of identifying, okay, well, do we have pain points and what are they? And if there were ways of working that would be quicker then or easier for us, then what would we use to do it in a secure way? The risk aspects are very significant. I think it's really important for organizations to consider that and to consider how they're going to govern their use of AI and how they're going to inform and train colleagues as well.
I think from an L&D perspective, so investing in learning and courses, a question I have is, because I really like your approach that you're taking to identifying a problem, workshopping it and implementing a solution. Companies up until very recently would buy lots of online learning and courses and kind of empower individuals to upskill and reskill in your own time, pick a course, whatever you want. It was more like a mini benefit. Whereas now the sense I'm getting from not just early talent, but mid-careers is, no, I really want to understand what are the skills or the courses I need to take in order to advance the job I'm in, be promoted, whatever it might be. Are you approaching the selection of learning and course investment differently than you have before?
We're definitely moving more into that space. We have always invested very heavily in learning and development for colleagues. It's kind of a core value part of the proposition to really help colleagues to learn and grow. What we were possibly less good at the past was connecting that to an organization outcome, identifying, okay, if we have had 50 colleagues, who have been developed in a core skill area, do we know how good they are? Have we kind of boiled that down into, developing competent or experts? Would we be able to kind of apply them to another area, for example? So, and I think that's not dissimilar to lots of organizations. And so I think that's really important. I think the pathway is very important. So giving colleagues building blocks. So you can do this foundational learning, or if you want to be really good, you can do more on top, or you can do more on top. Again, I think that that's very helpful for colleagues to say, okay, what are the skills I need rather than what course will I do? And so again, I think that that's a win for a colleague and a win for an organization, because you're saying, look, we think that these are areas that will serve you in the future. And then colleagues just saying, oh, okay, so I can grasp that then. I know what's important for me to do and what I can leverage actually to keep developing my career.
So in a way, it's nearly giving them the skills gap insights to them as an individual, but giving them agency to then go with the speed that they want in order to progress. We have a closing tradition to each episode where I ask two questions and you can answer both or one. It's completely up to you. The first question is there a skill you developed when you were younger that you don't necessarily use anymore that you'd like to? And if so, why? And then the second question is, I think it's really just to help those that are listening that have maybe taken redundancy, been made redundancy, or they're even starting out and they're not getting called back and they're maybe feeling like, well, what should I do in terms of not just sit around? Are there skills I can acquire or any action I can take? Would love your insights.
Skill I had early in my career, I used to be really good at Excel, like really good. And I don't really use it so much anymore. But I remember actually all those hours of training, setting up pivot tables. And every so often I remind myself and I get really excited again. Excel was probably the world's most powerful business intelligence tool before anyone even used that language. So, and back also when you couldn't just, buy reports in the format you wanted, you had to actually figure out how to do it yourself. So that's probably something that I'm less reliant on now. Then your second question, what would I do or what advice would I give to people who've been made redundant, etc.? So look, very hard position to be in, and particularly where, the world of work is very uncertain and it's changing a lot. I think I would bring it back to skills and say, okay, what am I really good at? Like when I boil it down, hopefully, where people have been able to take advantage maybe of some outplacement or career transition services, I would always say use it. Sometimes people don't, but if you can do and understand what your skills are, what you're really good at, and are there adjacent fields? Are there things that you can invest in? There is fortunately a lot of investment available for people who are looking to pivot into different areas through intro, through different, kind of skill-based learning frameworks, etc. So I would tap into those as well and see, are there adjacent fields, innovation, for example, AI for innovation. There are a lot of kind of digital tools out there, etc., which are never any harm, and they always, I think, can lead to other areas. The last thing I'd say is anything that's going to improve your learning agility. So learning builds learning. So the more you're learning, the more you're picking them up, the more you're probably going to remind yourself, oh yeah, I used to know how to do this other thing, and maybe I can dust that off too. But then you also start to learn from other people, and those connections build connections, and that's very important.
This has been a really inspiring episode, and I don't know if you realize how many little gems you drop throughout, but like the one thing I've got from it is that at the very beginning of your career, you just heart and head made choices. And then there seems to be just constant learning and progression and development in what you're doing right now. And there's no question of an AI fear. It's like, embrace it, but not let AI take over. We're very clear on where we're going. I think that's a really great message to share with business leaders and educators listening. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Whether you're leading a business, shaping education, planning your next career move, or just starting out, you're part of a global conversation about how we learn, work, and grow. If you've enjoyed this episode, remember to subscribe so you never miss what's next. And for early access to new episodes, first invites to events, and a chance to connect with others driving real change, join the community at globalskillspodcast.com, because the future of skills belongs to all of us.